Well, if you were like me, you were probably excited when you saw patch 1.09. There were quite a few things in here that were buffed and debuffed until, as of recently, there's been a few players out here that discovered a current bug going on. So let's go ahead and talk about what spells are broken. If you did not know, currently there are some buffs that are not being applied correctly. For example, in the next few clips, you're going to see a difference between no buff and buff being applied. What I will be using is Flame Sling to demonstrate the damage. What you will notice is that when I do throw down the Flame Sling, I'm going to be able to inflict 800 damage. Let's go ahead and see what happens when I use the Howl of Shibari. For those that do not know, when you use this spell, it will apply a 25% damage buff. So what's interesting is that when you apply this with the Flame Sling, or really with any spell, you will notice that the damage has not increased one bit. In this clip, I inflicted the same amount of damage with the buff. Now in this clip, I'm going to show you again. This is without the buff. Of course, different damage, yet we are going to see that when I do apply the buff, there's not going to be a difference at all in the damage, and in fact, it will be the same exact number. Now this time, I will be using Golden Vow. The thing about this specific spell is that this applies a damage buff towards you and your allies. What you're going to see right here is, well, no difference in the damage. I'm not too sure what's going on. Maybe the two are not being applied correctly within the code or something. But if we headed towards a different spell that increases damage, of course this is without the buff. And now let's use Flame Grant Me Strength. We are going to see right here that it's the same exact damage. What's interesting is that these buffs prior used to go together like peanut butter and jelly just perfectly. It just was the best. Now it seems that it's quite the opposite. And in fact, if you use Contagious Fury and Catch Flame together, try using that and you will notice that nothing's happening. Like, you're not going to be able to inflict any damage. Essentially what we are doing here is tickling these enemies. Now, this would typically show some numbers, some sort of health bar. So nothing's really happening here. There's been a lot of complaints recently about this. So I'm sure there will be some sort of hotfix eventually. If not, maybe Tuesday, which is coming up. Now, I will be honest, with this bug currently going on, there might be more buffs out there not working. Yet, let me tell you what buffs are working. If you use this with your bow, and I'm assuming with probably even the crossbow, it works the same. So you can tell the damage there is low. Okay, we are using a bow here, and if we use a buff, it could use Golden Vow, Shibari. It honestly could be any of these buffs. This will increase the damage, and that's honestly cool and all, but I don't think a lot of us use bows. I could be wrong. I personally don't. If you use this on the Flame Sling, yeah, you're not going to see any difference in damage. Now, if we use the Flame Grant Me Strength and we use it on a bow, what you will see is that the damage has increased just like before. This is currently affecting spells only, and this is why if you want to use something like a bow to increase it, or your sword, then you can definitely do so. That's an option. As for your spell builds or your mage builds, I would highly suggest that you don't even bother using those buffs. Of course, you can use your spells, but it's just not going to benefit you one bit if you are trying to gain that extra damage to inflict on your boss or your enemies and whatnot. What builds to use instead is probably a big question, speaking of what we just talked about. What I suggest is probably using something like a bleed build or even a faith build. What I'm using within this video can be honestly mixed around. For example, Shard of Alexander. You can use one of his other shards, and that's when you take him out early, and of course you're going to miss out on the storyline there. You can use things such as the Scorpion. This increases your holy damage, and not to mention there's also the Halo Tree Helm. This does a phenomenal job on increasing the holy damage, and let's go ahead and show you an example of what this looks like. As you can tell, we're one-hitting enemies, and you can spam this all day long. and tell, of course, your FP is lower down. One hits are amazing as well, and if you want to check out the whole entire build, check out my previous video because that is definitely worth checking out. I actually love this build, and I know it's not too complicated because of course you could throw in some flasks, you can mix up some tiers, and essentially you can even use some food items to increase the damage. There's a lot to do that you can add to this. I like to simplify it so this way you guys can kind of mix it up with whatever items you personally want to use, but hey, it's really up to you. I like to keep things simple, and this is what you can use essentially. There is also the bleed build that I just talked about, and if you did not know, in the recent patch 1.09, they have buffed the curved greatswords. Essentially, if you want to use something like Margot's cursed sword, I highly recommend it because it has some good bleed damage behind it, and the Ashes of War is just phenomenal when it comes to clearing out a lot, and I mean a lot of enemies. And I'm going to be showing you a clip here at the end and showing you how good this build actually is. You can, of course, like I've mentioned before, mix this up. If you would like to not use this exact sword, you can use maybe a katana of some sort. I'm personally just sticking to new stuff that has been increased. And as you can tell right here, this is doing a good job of taking out a lot of these enemies. Now, before I end the video, let's just kind of run it back again. If you use anything like a spell buff on another spell, this is going to totally negate the damage, so you're not going to buff anything really. If you use this on swords or you use it on a bow, it will increase the damage. Now, if you want to use talismans to increase it, that's not an issue there. It's just when you use a spell that has a buff, like for example Vow, or even Flame Give Me Strength or whatnot, stuff like that will not work. Now, when will this be fixed? I honestly have no clue. I would assume maybe Tuesday, or heck, let's just throw a wild card in there and say it's tomorrow, and I upload this video, they fix it, and you guys are watching it and they're like, this has already been hotfixed, no worries dude, then yeah, I might end up just deleting the video. But if not, hopefully you found this useful because yeah, you want to avoid it. But yeah, thank you guys overall for watching the video. If you have any questions, leave them down below. And as always at the end of the video, if you are new to the channel, feel free to subscribe and click the bell icon and make sure you're notified for all. Thank you all again for subscribing, and I'll see you all in the next video.